I should say before I begin that I was off for a couple weeks, but I do have copies of today's sermon manuscript if you want to take home and mull it over. Call me up later with questions, comments, cheers, jeers. You know, I was telling the children it's the third week of Advent, but the symbols of Christmas have been in place since Thanksgiving, or probably since Halloween. I feel like you walk into Michael's right after Halloween and they've already switched over to Christmas. Illuminated manger scenes adorn the lawns of churches and homes, and Christmas carols sung by everyone from the Mormon Tabernacle Choir to the Muppets have been broadcast over the airwaves. And if your taste run more towards Muppets than the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, I will not judge. The story of Christ's birth and its unusual circumstances has been told and retold, and I feel like we get to this point in Advent thinking to ourselves, what else is there to know? Christmas Eve is next Sunday, and as my grandma would say, it is all over but the shouting. But telling the story of Christmas, sharing the words of the prophets, this is one of our joys and blessings of the season. Here in our own congregation, we were blessed by having the children and youth share their own witness to the Christmas story. They did that the first Sunday in Advent through their pageant. And last week, the choir testified to the coming birth of Christ through their service of lessons and carols. And now it's our turn. Everyone who claims to follow Jesus bears a responsibility to witness to his light. And whether we tell about Jesus through story or song, word and deed, the privilege is ours to point others to the divine light. Now, our gospel reading for this morning gives us the example of the one that is sent by God to prepare the way for Jesus. And John shows up every Advent. He plays the role of divine storyteller in the Christmas story. He exists to challenge and encourage all of us on the road to Bethlehem and beyond. John is also an example of this is what it means to believe in God so much, to have so much trust in the purposes of God that silence is not an option. John's witness is the glory and light of God, and it propels his message across the countryside, down every highway and through the backwaters. We don't know much about John in the Gospel of John. It's not John the Baptist who wrote the Gospel of John, by the way, but we don't know much about him just according to our text. All we know is that God chose him to tell others about the Messiah. John's place in the Advent narrative reminds us that ordinary people play an extraordinary role in reflecting the light of God. The preaching professor and Bible scholar Caroline Lewis observes that witness, bearing witness, giving testimony is an Advent calling. To give witness is to break the silence. It is to let go of what the response might be and do it just because you have to. It is to acknowledge that you cannot not testify to how you have experienced God in your life. And when you see God at work, when you know God is there by your side. Witness, therefore, witness should not be separated from evangelism. Now, did the word evangelism make you squirm in your pew a little bit? It's one of those loaded churchy terms that can cause some discomfort. Evangelism and evangelist, when we think of evangelist, there's always the cartoon of the guy in the sandwich board, conjuring up images of doomsday and hellfire and damnation and all that jazz. And Presbyterians tend to favor more what I consider a soft sell about evangelism. And maybe there was a time when a soft sell was more appropriate. That was an appropriate strategy to telling about the love of God, but the world has changed. There's more and more people that are becoming disaffected and dissatisfied with the church, and young people particularly believe that the church is racist and sexist and homophobic, and they choose not to join worshiping communities. Now, of course, we follow a Messiah that models self-giving love and inclusivity, and we here at this church, we're here because we have something to say about that witness to that inclusive love. And David Bartlett points out that given the gift that Advent celebrates, the gift of Jesus Christ, it is simply selfish to keep that good news to ourselves. The light may spark within the walls of the sanctuary. I see all the lights here that are flickering, and the light has sparked in the sanctuary, but it cannot and must not be contained here. Advent reminds us that the divine light, it's out there too, folks. The divine light is out there, and I can think of numerous examples. One of the most contemporary is that earlier this week, right here in Topeka, the Topeka Metro, their bus system, announced that there is going to be a new pilot program that will provide discounted transportation to those manufacturing plants that are in South Topeka. As you can imagine, these are the kind of jobs they don't pay particularly well, and they're generally held by lower income workers, and they can't afford reliable cars. Now, why am I bringing this up? This is a momentous accomplishment for the community. I'm bringing this up because Topeka Jump, of which Trinity has been a member of, has been advocating for years for increased bus service. This transportation pilot program is a small step in the right direction, and it is evidence of how Trinity Church and our work with Jump and our dedication and witness can change the lives of people in our community. The divine light is out there, folks. And I also think of, the past few months, I've only been with you guys since August, but I've seen this congregation faithfully support Topeka Rescue Mission, Let's Help, Harvesters, Doorstep, just a few of our local organizations. And we have members here who meet with politicians on city council that serve lunch to hungry people, or they even travel to El Salvador. This congregation has witnessing to the light of Christ. It's in our DNA. Caroline Lewis explains that giving witness to the light is not always comfortable, and it might even be painful. But it exposes what needs to be brought out into the open, and in the end, it insists that the light will indeed shine, that it will overcome the darkness that has hidden so much for so long. Advent is not just a brief liturgical observance. Advent can never be passive. It's never just waiting or anticipating or expecting. No, the call of Advent's embodiment is witness. And I want to point out, and John makes this very point himself, that we don't serve and we don't seek justice just so we can feel good about ourselves. I mean, we might feel good about ourselves. And I would hope that you do, but that's not the end. That is not why we witness. This passage from the gospel reminds us that our work, what does it do? It points to God. Everything that we do, our justice work, our testimony, points to God's desire for justice. Advent is not just the season of peace, hope, joy, and love. It is not just a season where we watch and wait and wonder. We can not only just watch and wait and wonder, it is also the season of testifying. He came as a witness to testify to the light so that all might believe through him. The world needs to believe that there's a light shining in the darkness. The world needs to see that the powers of greed, ignorance, and indifference will not be the powers that shape human destiny. I was thinking this week about my grandmother. Her birthday, she's passed away, but her birthday was in December, and I always think about her this time of year. And she had this chandelier that hung in the dining room. It was a mid-century masterpiece. I love this thing. And it had these cut crystals that would dangle from the antique brass, and the air conditioner would turn on or the door would open, and this little shift in air pressure would cause all those little crystals to swing delicately. And every crystal was beautiful by itself, but they were all made more beautiful by the reflecting of light. Every multifaceted bead and that pendant that hung from the bottom radiated light from the source light, from the light bulbs that were the source. And so every crystal would radiate that light, and they would also radiate each other. So the chandelier would brighten up even the darkest corner. Even that tiny little eating area with the chandelier would be illuminated because the light would reflect the light. And in the same way, all of us, each of us testifies and reflects the light of Christ. We are fearfully and wonderfully made by the hands of God. And when we bear witness to God's ongoing creation, when we testify to God's justice that is going on in the world, when we do that, you know what happens? We shine. And we shine that divine light on others, and we shine that light on ourselves. And we'll find that the Christmas story doesn't ever end. It is reflected and magnified. Like John, may our witness, may our testimony share the light for all people. Thanks be to God. Amen.